Ah, tax season. For millions of us, it's that time of year filled with this weird mix of confusion, a little bit of anxiety, and just a whole lot of paperwork. It feels like for every single piece of good tax advice, there are 10 myths just floating around. So I figured, let's dig in. Let's really separate what's fact from what's fiction. I mean, the whole world of taxes is just filled with stuff that sounds contradictory, right? And we all have these deeply held beliefs that, well, aren't always backed up by the actual data. We hear things from everywhere, from cable news, from our neighbor over the fence, you name it. Okay, this is a big one. You've heard this, right? It's a common line you hear in just about any heated political debate, and it paints this picture of a system that's just completely rigged for the wealthy. And then you've got this one, which is on the complete other end of the spectrum. This is that piece of personal finance wisdom that, a lot of us grew up hearing. Getting that big check from the government, it feels amazing. It must mean you're a financial wizard, right? Well, as we're about to see, these two ideas, even though they seem totally different, are both prime examples of tax mythology. So first, let's start with the big picture stuff, the myths that really shape our national conversations about the US tax system as a whole. To really get to the bottom of that first myth, the one about the rich not paying taxes, we have to ask this really basic question. Where does the money that runs the federal government actually come from? Okay, now what's so cool about this slide is how clearly it lays out the data. And this is straight from the IRS. See the green bars? That's each group's share of the total income earned in the country. And the purple bars? That shows that same group's share of the total federal income taxes they paid. Just look at the pattern here for a second. The higher a group's income goes, the bigger their share of the taxes paid become. So the data is pretty darn clear. The top half of earners in the U.S. pay a whopping 97% of all federal income taxes. In fact, the top 1% alone pays over a third of that. This, right here, is the very definition of a progressive tax system, where the folks who earn more pay a larger slice of the pie. And hey, this isn't just about the income tax. Even when you zoom out and you start including all the federal taxes, so payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, corporate taxes, the whole shebang, the system as a whole is still progressive. Americans with the highest incomes are still paying the largest share. All right, let's tackle our next big picture myth. This one kind of looks to the past for inspiration. You've probably heard someone bring up this golden era back in the 1950s when the top tax rate was a sky-high 91%. So the story usually goes that this super high rate on the wealthy funded the government like crazy. But the reality? It's a bit different. The marginal rate, that's the tax on the very last dollar you earn, was 91%. But the effective rate, what the wealthiest households actually paid on their total income after all the deductions and loopholes, was much, much lower. We're talking closer to 21%. So how is that even possible? Well, this slide breaks it down. First, as you can see, that 91% bracket only kicked in for income over what would be $2 million today. So very few people even qualified. Second, it was marginal, which means only the income above that line was taxed at 91%. And finally, when a rate is that high, it just encourages people to find creative ways to avoid it, which meant they reported less income to begin with. Okay, so debunking these huge national policy myths is interesting and all, but let's be real. Taxes are also deeply personal. How does all this fact and fiction actually impact your own wallet come April? So now let's get personal. Let's talk about the myths that actually affect your bank account. This is where knowing the truth can save you some real money and honestly, a whole lot of stress. I love this quote because it just completely reframes the whole idea of a big tax refund. It's so easy to see it as a bonus, right? Or like a gift from the government. But what's really going on? It's really just the government giving you back the money that you overpaid them all year long. You gave them an interest-free loan with your own cash that you could have been using or saving or investing for the last 12 months. From a financial perspective, the actual goal is to get your refund as close to zero as you possibly can. Okay, so beyond refunds, let's talk about the fears, the stuff that can stop us from making smart moves with our taxes. And the biggest one of all has to be the dreaded audit. Just seeing the word can send a little shiver down your spine, can't it? It makes you think of some scary interrogation room with a harsh light. But what is an audit really like for most people? Well, the reality is way less dramatic. The vast majority of audits are simple mail audits. You just get a letter from the IRS. It'll ask for some more information or documentation for a specific thing on your return. You mail it back, and usually that's the end of it. No harsh lights involved. And here's another fear that costs people money: the fear of amending a return. It's so easy to think that if you go back and fix a mistake, you're putting a giant red flag on your file for the IRS. But it's actually the opposite. The IRS wants you to file an amended return so that everything is accurate. And finally, this one. Oh my gosh, the fear of getting a raise. So many people worry that earning more money will push them into a new tax bracket and they'll somehow take home less money. That is just not how it works. Only the dollars you earn above the line for that new bracket get taxed at the higher rate. A raise is always a good thing for your take-home pay. So after cutting through all of that misinformation, all those myths, what's the big takeaway here? It really comes down to this: knowledge is power. Seriously. Understanding the data makes you a more informed citizen in those big conversations. And understanding the rules for your own return, that helps you make way better financial decisions for yourself and for your family. So I'll just leave you with that question to think about. Now that you know the facts, how will you approach tax season differently this year? Because honestly, understanding the difference between tax fact and tax fiction, well, it can change everything.